everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be all about post-apocalyptic books. When I started my journey on BookTube, it was the one thing I love to read the most, so I thought I would just give you a quick review on all of the ones, or most of the ones that I've read since I started BookTube, letting you know which ones are the best, the worst, the ones I would recommend. Essentially just a long list of review, and at the end I will also include my TBR, basically a list of other ones that I'm looking forward to reading, so you get more suggestions and you can tell me which ones I need to hurry up and read. As always, my video is going to be spoiler free as much as possible. If there are spoilers I want to add, I have a section at the end before my TBR. I'll put the timestamp actually in the description box where I'll announce very clearly that I'm about to reveal some spoilers slash some books. It's just a spoiler that it's a post-apocalyptic book. So no worries there, but I do want to add these books to the list because some of them are actually the best ones in this list and they just need to be raved about. So let's start. This list would not feel legit for a lot of you if I didn't talk about these two books because they seem to be the ones that are mentioned the most whenever you say the words post-apocalyptic. So let's go through them. Let's start with The Stand by Stephen King. This is very, very famous. It was written in the 70s and I have a lot of things to say. I have the humongous uncut edition. There's like 1,300 pages. It is a very, very long book. The good things about it. The first thing is that this one, the theme is a disease killing 99% of the population, which is actually my favorite way of everyone dying, apparently. That sounds kind of disturbing, but it's true. The strong part is definitely the beginning because the way it describes how the disease actually spreads is just awesome. And you are following the Remnant of Humanity, people trying to survive, and it becomes essentially a battle between good and evil. The negative parts with this one would be the ending, which is always the case, it feels like, in a Stephen King book. The ending, I do agree, was not the strongest part. It was quite abrupt. Again, spoiler free. Also, one thing I did want to mention that made the book kind of feel quite aged is that there's this whole trope in there of women keeping your virginity for the devil, which is not something that would fly, I feel like, in 2020, but whatever. Just wanted to mention it because I definitely cringe whenever I listen to that bit. I also want to mention that there are some fantasy elements which I feel like are important to mention. There usually are actually in a Stephen King book, but if you don't know, definitely something to be prepared for. And overall, I understand the hype. It's not my favorite in this video, but it's definitely one of the ones with the most hype, and I do understand it overall. Fun fact, whenever you try and say this word 10 times, it just sounds weird after that. Swan Song by Robert McCammon. That book is also always on list of post-apocalyptic books to read. You see them being compared quite often. I read both of them, I believe in 2017, when I was doing like my big book reading challenge. I was trying to read a big one every month, and I read both of them in the same year and I didn't have any issue, confusing them, and I don't feel like they're that comparable except for the fact that they're both big. They're both post-apocalyptic and they both have fantasy elements, but that's pretty much, I feel like, the only thing that they have in common. I did feel like this one had more fantasy elements. This one was also way, way darker. In this one, you have a nuclear war with Russia and a bunch of people die. Obviously, nuclear means there's going to be some consequences for years and years and years to come. It's very much gruesome. Like, the details are kind of out there. Like, if you're someone that is very insensitive, this might not be for you. You might have nightmares. There are some wars between different groups of humans, and as you know, a war, things are gonna get very dark, and obviously trigger warnings for a bunch of things, including rape. I do have a little bit more difficulty talking about this one. I felt like it was a bit more confusing to try and explain. It is actually even harder to get into because you're introduced to the characters one by one, and when you start getting into one, you're switching to another one. And one of the first characters you're introduced to is actually a homeless woman, and she's kind of crazy, so it gets a bit confusing at times. With that said, I felt like some bits were very, very interesting. Some of the parts ended up becoming a bit long for me. And I personally wasn't super into the ending because, again, the fantasy elements, which, again, spoiler free. But I don't know, neither of these ended up becoming a favorite for me. I do understand the importance of them, I understand the hype. Maybe they ended up being a bit too big and slow for me. I'm not too sure, but definitely worth a read because of all the hype, right? The next book I want to talk about is something I did really enjoy. It's actually more of a short story or novella by Richard Matheson, and it is I Am Legend, which I feel like we've all seen that movie with Will Smith, which was fantastic, but completely different, which obviously if you're going to read the book and the movie, you're going to compare them, and they're nothing like literally nothing. I did like this one quite a bit. It is much darker, much more sexual, and actually at the end you understand the title, I Am Legend, and then you get mad at the movie because even though the movie is great, the title never made any sense, right? It does in this one, and it was fantastic. I highly recommend it. It is about 160 pages, so very quick read, and it's really not what I expected, but not in a bad way. I definitely do recommend that one. I am trying to keep things short and sweet as much as possible just because I have like 15 books to talk about just from the ones I have read. But the next one is also something you're going to see on a lot of lists of, post-apocalyptic books to read, and it is Wool. One thing that is worth noting is the fact that it's actually 5 short stories in one, and it is a trilogy. I have only read so far the first book, but compared to some of the other books I'll mention, sometimes when you look back on a book, you kind of care less about it. I feel like this one, it's actually kind of the opposite. It's happening. Just talking about it for this video, I feel like I want to continue. So that might happen soon. But I think it's the first 2-3 stories were really, really good. And then the next 2, I was kind of so-so about them. I felt like I just didn't care as much. They kind of were a little too stretched and I got a little bored, which is probably, once again, why I didn't continue. But in this one, the Remnant of Humanity are living in Silo, is that how to say it in English? I always want to say it in French. I never even pronounce the name of the author anymore because H's are just my worst enemy. People have rules to follow because the outside world will kill them. And when you do something that is unacceptable, you are sent outside to clean the windows and then, go and die essentially. But there's been that mystery of people not understanding why people do it, because obviously if people are being sent to die, why would you help the rest of the people? And it just kind of starts that way, and I'm gonna leave it at that. It is interesting, it is worth a read, and I do need to continue because now that I think about it, I am intrigued to continue and see where this is going. The next book is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and this one is unlike all of the other ones I talked about, and most of the other ones I'm going to talk about too, because it is probably one of the most chill post-apocalyptic book I've ever read. It's more literally fiction, and it's a bit more like solely character driven. Even though there are still some quite dark bits, it can be quite confusing to read because there's a lot of back and forth between the timelines. You have the before, the disease that killed, they never actually specify, but let's say like 99% of humanity. And you have when it happens, which was the most interesting part in my opinion, which wish there had been more. And then you have the after, where you're following some of the people that are left that become a theater group. They just call it a small troupe, and they just walk from a small village to village to do some Shakespeare play. It does get kind of strange at time, and it's kind of hard to explain it without spoiling it. But if you're more someone that enjoys character-driven book, even though they can get kind of dark, I do recommend this one over the other ones. I feel like there's a stronger chance you're going to enjoy that one. If you are someone that enjoys more military book, you need to read World War Z by Max Brooks, and I highly recommend you actually get to that one as an audiobook if that's your jam, because the format is interviews, which was probably my mistake. I tried to read it instead of giving it a shot as an audiobook because I'm not huge on military books, so I had a tough time going through it because once again I did compare it to the movie, which nothing like nothing. I enjoyed the movie. The book, I struggle a little bit more. You kind of have to piece together what happened with the zombie apocalypse through those little interviews. And it was interesting, but it just ended up becoming too military again for me. So not my personal favorite. I have been meaning to actually give the audiobook a shot, which I probably will eventually. But if that's your jam, this is definitely going to be one of your favorite in this video. So this one is probably more like pre-apocalypse than really post-apocalypse, but we're gonna count it because I choose the rules here. The Last Policeman by Ben H. Winters. And this is one of the most unique book, like premise-wise, in this video. Humanity is going crazy because we know for a fact that we are going to be hit by a humongous asteroid, and it's going to kill most, if not all of us. And you're following this last policeman who decides to still focus on this murder mystery, trying to solve it. There are 6 months left in the first book, and it goes down like that during the whole trilogy until the end, which, you know, this is where the day it happens type of thing. I did like the first book. I felt like my interest ended up going down towards the last book. The ending was not satisfying for me, but I do still wanted to recommend it because, again, the premise is super interesting and I think it is worth mentioning, giving it a little bit of hype because the first book was actually quite unique. So definitely would recommend checking out The Last Policeman if that seems like something you would be into. I also wanted to talk about Bird Box by Josh Malerman, which I understand there's been that movie that everyone likes to hate. I don't get that because actually the movie is better than the book. I'm someone that hates, and I mean hates when things are vague. Like if it's alien invasion, if it's a big old monster, just tell me and I will be happy about it. I just want to know. But when you keep things vague, I get very, very annoyed. It just makes me feel like the author didn't know what to do, you know? And that's probably my main complaint about this one. It's not a spoiler. Something happens and people that see whatever it is go crazy, they kill people, and then they kill themselves. And obviously everyone is being told to stay inside, cover the windows, and you kind of go back and forth between some timelines following Mallory. I really enjoyed the bits where the apocalypse essentially happens. And then you get her in the present tense, who she has 2 kids with her and she has to try and go somewhere to get some help. I think the strong point in this book was definitely while it's happening, you know, the feeling of like fear and oh my God, I have to hide were very, very well done. And there's actually book 2 coming out. I believe it's this year. Like it's been pushed back to 2020, which we are now. So I'm crossing my finger that book 2 will be even better. I'm hoping that we're finally gonna get some answers, and fingers crossed, I will definitely be reading it as soon as I can and letting you know if I think it is worth the read. But I did enjoy this one overall. It is quite short, so it's definitely not a big commitment, or you can also just watch the movie. I felt like once again it was even better done than the book. Next is The Fireman by Joe Hill. I have very, very mixed feelings about this one. Some scenes I felt like were 5 stars, some of them were kind of just 2. Let's go back what it is about. There is this new disease which is called dragon scale that affects people. When you catch it, you get some like black lines, like a tattoo on your body that starts appearing, and there's this fire that starts burning inside of you, and if you can control yourself, it just eventually explodes. And humanity is essentially on fire at this point. You're following a young nurse who learns that she's pregnant and she's trying to keep herself together until she can give birth to her baby. And like I was saying, some scenes were really, really strong. I did enjoy the overall disease. I felt like it was quite unique. Once again, it's a very, very big book, and I did feel like at some point it just started feeling a bit too stretched. And as much as, you know, this one I was mentioning how with time I feel like I'm more curious to like go back into that universe, I feel like this one, the more time passes, I read this in 2016, 17, 18. It's been a little while. I feel like I'm forgetting more and more about it, and it's not as memorable as some of the other ones in this video. But if you're looking for one more recommendation, it's not a terrible book. I'm definitely selling it. More books that I'm definitely not going to be selling. We have The Passage and The Girl with All the Gifts, which I'm mentioning them at the same time because it felt like I read the same book twice. I'm warning you, these 2 reviews are going to be the worst in this video. So, The Passage by Justin Cronin. This is book 1 in a trilogy, but I'm telling you right now, the first book is literally a trilogy all in one. You follow some characters, but you just, it cuts off, you have a different story. It cuts off, you have a different story. And the characters you get attached to are side characters, and you're going to be very sad that they are gone, which that's how I felt. The apocalypse in this case is kind of like vampire zombies. Did I not get that? There is actually a TV show too, by the way. I keep mentioning these things, but I did watch a couple episodes and it was well done. I just didn't care enough to continue after reading the book. And I have so little to say about this one. And oh, look, the same thing, literally. This little girl is a zombie, I guess. There is a movie, did not watch it, and I will not watch it. So I know these reviews very, very much suck, but I just wanted to give you those two names because they're still quite popular. This is a YA one. This is, I believe, adult, even though it kind of read YA. So I'm gonna end this here. Quick shout out to two other books, which I feel like are kind of like apocalyptic, really more than post-apocalyptic, but whatever. First off, we have Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and Owen King. In this universe, there is this disease that starts affecting women, and they go to sleep and kind of form a cocoon around them. And if you try to wake them up, they will go insane, kill you, and go back to sleep. So you have women trying to stay awake, men trying to figure out what's going on. You follow a million characters, and I'm not lying. You literally get a list of the characters because there are way too many for anyone to remember. It gets very strange, but I think the best part in the whole book is that you follow a group of people that are actually in a women's prison, which things get kind of messed up. And you meet one of my all-time favorite, most hated character of all time, Don Peters, who is a complete piece of shit. So this is probably my main reason for even mentioning the book. If you want to hate someone, definitely read this book. Overall, it kind of ended up being like a 3.5 stars for me because, again, some of the concept and ideas were very interesting, but things got kind of weird in the ending, as always. So the last one I want to mention before the spoiler section happens is Run by Blake Crouch, which I got rid of. So that kind of tells you how I feel about it. I have a complicated relationship with Blake Crouch. I really, really love his newer books. I despise his old stuff, including Run. I do want to say a spoiler, so actually I'm not going to say it. I'm going to put it on the screen because it's just a little bit of information, so just look away for like 10 seconds if you don't want to know. But this was definitely one of my main pet peeves because why? I hate that. And then there's also the fact that the children, because you're following a family trying to escape to Canada, because over here apparently we didn't see it, and the kids are so freaking annoying. I literally wanted to burn that book because of them. And I was actually discussing that with some of you, and kids usually in crazy situations, they can adapt better than adults, quite often at least. And it was not the case in the book. They were so annoying. Anyway, I hated that book. Do not recommend it, but it's quite short, so maybe you would enjoy it. So maybe I do recommend it. It's up to you. Now, the spoiler section. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, any mention of books that are post-apocalyptic and you don't want to know, I will be putting the timestamp for the section that is about TBR books that I want to read in the future. So you can go ahead and look at that list if you want more recommendations. And also I will create a list on Goodreads, so all my post-apocalyptic books that I've read or not will be in there. I'm still gonna keep things very vague because I don't want to spoil the whole thing anyway. So the first two books are, are they post-apocalyptic? Are they not? Are the people crazy? Are they not? So if you like that like type of mystery and vague stuff, these two will be right up your alley. The first one is the last one, where you're following a woman who is a participant in a TV reality show, think like Survivor. So she is in the forest and she gets lost and she is not sure if they're still filming her, still following her, and she decides to walk back home to find her husband, and you don't know if the apocalypse happened or not. So leaving it there. And then the second book is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, which similar thing, you following a family that is in a cabin in the woods, and people arrive one day, take them captive, and try to force them to do some stuff, telling them that the world is ending and they need to stop it, and you don't know, are they crazy? Is this really happening? And keeping it vague. And then the last two, it's definitely, especially one of these, a huge spoiler to say that it is post-apocalyptic, but sometimes I still find it interesting to add a book into like my list of books I want to read because I know now that it has something I'm interested in. So just in case, the first one is Recursion by Blake Crouch, which if you've enjoyed Dark Matter by him, you will most likely enjoy that one. I have been letting other people read it, and so far everyone is enjoying it. The main premise, you're following a detective that's trying to understand what's going on because a bunch of people are killing themselves because they keep remembering false memories, lives that they have not lived, even though they could swear they have. And then you're also following a woman that is trying to help people that do have problems like Alzheimer, for example. And things get quite intense, and again, the spoiler-y section is the fact that at one point in the book, it becomes of trying to prevent the world from from going completely to shit. So again, I'm gonna leave it here, but I did want to mention it that it does contain some post-apocalyptic sections in there. And then the last but not least, but the one that is definitely a major spoiler, which again, you have been warned, is also from Blake Crouch, and it is Pines. The Weirwood Pines series is freaking amazing. I really didn't expect it whenever I got to that one. It starts with a secret agent, I think. Yes, Secret Service agent. And he is sent to this small little village, and 2 of his colleagues disappeared there, and he's sent to figure out what happened. And then you get those like weird small town vibes, nobody really wanting to help him, and things get very weird. And I'm just gonna, again, leave it here, even though it is a spoiler too, that I even have said that it is a post-apocalyptic series, but do recommend it for sure. I loved it. Like, definitely get your hands on all 3 if you can from the library or something, because you're going to want to binge read the whole thing. So I'm not going to put it in the back because, again, I want to avoid the spoiler, but so good. No more spoilers here. Now let's go through the books that I have on my shelf that I want to read that have, at least as far as I know, a post-apocalyptic premise. Feel free, by the way, to let me know which one of these I should hurry up and read and which ones I don't have on my shelf that I need to get to. I may already know about them or I may not, so I will have to add them to my TBR. So first one being very famous, you have The Road. I did try to read it, but the way it's written was kind of off-putting, to be honest, so I just never did. I did watch the movie, kind of disturbing, but it made me want to read the book, so eventually I will have to get there. I have Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. I have On the Beach, Good Morning Midnight, which all I know is that it's pretty chill also, if you are interested. Another one actually I've heard that was pretty chill if you are more less action driven, want to not read about people getting murdered all the time. I've heard that Dog Stars is also a good one for that. I have Earth Abides, Alas Babylon, I cannot say that in English. Metro 2033, and Parable of the Sower. I think these are most of the post-apocalyptic or just apocalyptic books that I have read or own on my shelf. So again, let me in the comment section if you have read any of these, what you think about them. Obviously try and keep it as spoiler-free as possible. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe because you definitely don't want to miss out on future videos with similar themes, because I'm planning on doing one with First Contact with Aliens very soon too, which is my current favorite trope. And I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye!